Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. This one is the Covenants Part 2, picking up right where we left off. Before we begin, let us start with Tehillim as usual. Hallelu et Adonai kol goyim, shabechu kol haomim, ki gavar elenu chasdo ve'emet Adonai le'olam, hallelujah. Before we get into the teaching, I just want to give you guys a quick date of my personal observation from what is happening right now in Israel. You know where I stand politically, right? The left are idiots and the right are idiots. Everybody's an idiot, right? Why do I say everybody's an idiot? It's not that people are idiots. All these people are fighting for what they believe in, right? I can't say that that person's wrong, just like that person can't say that I'm wrong. Everybody's got their own difference of opinion. What I'm saying is, I don't believe in governments. That's what I'm saying. You put your voice, as they say in Israel, you're voting. When you vote, you give your kol, you give your voice to a governing body. So whether you vote left or right, it doesn't matter because the entire system itself is corrupt. This is how I see it very clearly. Okay? Whether you are left or right, to me, that is irrelevant because at the end of the day, what I see is happening is that Israel are fighting against Israel. That's the part that bothers me most. Now, up until relatively recently with these protests, regardless of reform, no reform, I'm not even getting into that. I'm looking at when I see these things on the TV or on the internet, I see my people's going crazy. And up until recently, as crazy as it was and as defiant as it was, okay, people are protesting, they're angry, fine. But the moment that violence starts to ensue, and I'm not talking about the police, riot police are called to do their job. Anybody steps out of line, you got to push them back into line, whether they're on the left or on the right. So I'm not going according to the police. I'm going according to these protesters, the supposedly peaceful protesters. I've already seen them beating up men and women with sticks, with the Israeli flag at the end, spitting on people, smacking their faces, cursing at them right in their ears, harassing them. This is violence. This should not happen. That's one thing, and that's already a big problem. The second thing is, and this happened right before Shabbat, they had the protests that they were blocking the entrance to Jerusalem. They were walking up Highway 1 to Jerusalem. And because of that, hundreds, thousands of people that needed to get to Jerusalem were stuck in traffic for hours, and they had to leave their cars on the side of the highway. Young families pushing baby strollers up kilometers of walking up the Jerusalem hills till wherever they get to within this massive city. So the side of these protesters, not only are they expressing their frustration, violence towards the other side, or in this case, towards reporters. TV reporters is supposed to be neutral, but they're beating them. It's crazy. So they have violence towards their brothers, and they're keeping Jews from entering Jerusalem, being late for Shabbat. The moment that you get in between a Jew and God, especially if you make it more difficult for them to keep Shabbat, you have no future. They could have been 100% right, let's say, with whatever they were protesting. This, because of violence and hitting your fellow Jew, and standing over there prohibiting people because now we are protesting to enter into Jerusalem, there's no future in that. None. End of story. And the scary part is that we already entered into the 9 days. I'm recording this on Monday. It's going to be up on Wednesday. Then we're on Wednesday night. We're already entering into Tisha B'Av. Why was the temple destroyed? Both temples, because of sinat chinam, baseless hate. If you saw how much hate is going on here right now, this is crazy from both sides. And in addition to that, like I said, you keep Jews from keeping the Torah, from keeping Shabbos in Jerusalem, from getting there, beating on one another. There's no future with anybody on any side who does that. And thus far, I've only seen it on one side. These protesters, they protest primarily on Shabbat, right? Which is, you're not supposed to do that anyway, but that's very clear that when they're doing this, so you see part of these protesters there's no Orthodox people, no religious people on this because we don't do it. You do have protests of the other side, and they don't happen on Shabbat. These are peaceful protests, right? They're not burning down things. They're not stopping traffic on these high levels. They're not cursing one another in their faces. They're not coming after camera crews. It's worrisome, but this is that time, and we're reaching that boiling point right now. So it's very interesting to see what is going to happen, especially when we get to Tisha B'Av, because it's a powder keg, okay? And like we said, Israel sets the pace and sets the tone for the rest of the world. If God forbid, it looks the way it looks like it, but if God forbid civil war breaks out in Israel, then the rest of the world, that's what's going to happen in the States and wherever else. So in any case, that's just an update. And the one thing that we can do, actually, obviously, we pray for peace among our brethren, hoping that God will open all their eyes and see that the governments are the ones that are pitting them against each other. Bunch of puppets. Because if we go out into the world, they don't care who you voted for, if you're left, if you're right. They care you're a Jew. They don't like you. They don't care who you voted for. That's what we're forgetting. In any case, let us begin. So we are right where we left off, the Covenants Part 2, right where we left off from Covenants Part 1 last week. When King David wanted to enter into the Jebusite city, they did not allow him, as said in 2 Samuel 5:6. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem to the Jebusites and the inhabitants of the land, who spoke to David, saying, "You shall not come here unless you remove the blind and the lame," as if to say, David shall not come here. This is what's written in the Torah, including as if to say. Vayomer leDavid לאמור, לא תבוא הנה, כי אם הסירך העברים, the blind, והפסחים, the lame, לאמור, to say, לא יבוא David הנה, David will not come in here. Okay, so Jerusalem was a Jebusite city. Now, before we get into this verse, up until this point, what we understand here is as follows, meaning what we started even the previous class. All throughout the days of Joshua and Judges, Israel were never able to conquer Jerusalem because the covenant struck between our forefathers and the Jebusites, which also extended to somehow the Philistines over there as well. David took care of that, though. When David became king of the united tribes of Israel, they feared that since he is from Judah, he would then favor Judah over all other tribes, right? But not our man David, right? We each come from our own respective tribes, and this is because a certain correction had to be made, but we are one nation. We are Israel. If only, right? If we were, right now we're two nations. Sort of. If only. This is why we asked for David. Okay. Jacob's experience in this very spot of the 12 or the 14 stone, the 12 stones or the 4 stones becoming one, prophesies exactly to this. And so since King David was the true king of all of Israel, he had to rule from a place that was acceptable to all, accessible to all, and yet owned by none. And that was the last city to be taken in Israel, Jerusalem. Lehavdil, it's like Washington, D.C. It's its own district, right? Neutral ground, if you will. Neutral. Furthermore, David spent all his days not only with Samuel, but after that, Samuel died at a young age of 52. After that, as well as searching through the Torah for hints to where the place that God desired his house to be built in, like we read in the book of Deuteronomy, and he understood that the last place to be taken was in fact the place where God's temple was to be built. When the Jebusites said in the verse, "You shall not come here unless you remove the blind and the lame," this has two meanings. Well, we're going to understand it from the simple text, okay, which is also an allegory. Meaning, the city is so well fortified, and it was, that if only a blind person and a lame person remain within its walls, you won't be able to take the city because its walls are so vast, and it was right off the edge of a mountain, so the climb is exponentially more difficult. But in the Midrash, it very clearly refers to the blind, Isaac, who's losing his sight in his later years, and the lame, Jacob, who is limping after the encounter with the angel of death. And why would they use our patriarchs as a deterrent? Because they built bronze images of Isaac and Jacob. And in the idol's mouth, in these images, there were written the oaths that were given by them. And when the patriarchs make a covenant, we know it's everlasting, right? Unless the covenant becomes null and void, like we discussed. Now, let's keep reading our text because there is so much backstory here, and I don't want to lose the point, and everything will become clear as we go along. So when King David wanted to enter into the Jebusite city, they did not allow him, as said in 2 Samuel 5:6. Let's read it one more time. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem to the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, who spoke to David, saying, "You shall not come here unless you remove the blind and the lame." In other words, remove them, then you could come. So we know that that's what happened, right? As if to say, David shall not come here. But Israel were as numerous as the sand of the sea, says Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. As it says in 2 Samuel 17:11, "Therefore I counsel that all Israel be gathered together to you from Dan to Beersheba, as many as the sand that is by the sea, and you personally go to battle." If Israel band together, they outnumbered the inhabitants of the city, easily 1,000 to 1. So what's stopping them from taking their future capital? But rather, because of the power of the covenant that Abraham made, as a result, David saw and returned to the citadel, as said in 2 Samuel 5:9. But let's read a couple of verses before that for context as well. We'll start with verse 7. "And David conquered the stronghold of Zion, which is the city of David." If you've been to Jerusalem and you've been to what is called the Old City today, that is not biblical Jerusalem, like we said time and again. Those walls are only 450 years old, from the time of Suleiman the Great. The stronghold of Zion is the city of David. That is biblical Jerusalem, while Temple Mount is right on the top of it. "And David said on that day, whoever smites the Jebusites and reaches the tower and removes the lame and the blind, despised by the soul of David. Therefore they say, the blind and the lame shall not come into the house. And David dwelt in the stronghold, Vayashev David Bametsudah, and he called it the city of David. And David built round about from the mound and inward." Now, from that day, it took a while until Jerusalem was actually taken by who? By Yoav, his king's guard, if you will, his general. Because in the meantime, we can read the next verse that says, "And David grew steadily greater." In other words, he didn't enter into the Jebusite city, into Jerusalem, but David grew steadily greater, and the Lord, the God of hosts, was with him. Great. So, from the point they spoke to David about him not entering, David returned to his people and said, "Whoever will go up first and remove those images upon which the sign of the covenant of Abraham's oath is written, he shall be the head." Head of what? Hu yeh lerosh. The guy to receive the grand prize, if you will. But we know that Yoav, as a result, became commander of David's armies. So while David was sitting in the citadel, which is higher than the actual city itself, he could see all their idolatry and he detested it. But no one would dare break the covenant. So how are we going to do this, right? We can't attack them because it's there. So how are we going to get inside to remove it so that we can then attack the city? Except that it had already been broken by the Jebusites. You see, this is what happened with the covenant. God made it so. The Jebusites breached the border between them and Judah, making the covenants null and void. So what happened next? And Yoav ben Surya ascended first, and he became the head, as said in 1 Chronicles 11:6. And David said, "Whoever smites the Jebusites first will be a chief and an officer." And Yoab the son of Zeruiah ascended first and became a chief, the head, as written in Hebrew, right? Vayal barishona Yoav ben Tzulia, Vayihi lerosh. Rosh, Rishona, Rosh is head, Rishona is first, but you see, head, first, they're all the same thing, it's the same word. Now this is very interesting to note, but the aforementioned tzinor from verse 8, let's just read that really quick because I forgot to read that in Hebrew. Okay, verse 8 in 2 Samuel 5. And David said on that day, whoever smites the Jebusites and reaches the tower and removes the lame and the blind. In Hebrew it says this, Vayomer David bayomahu, on that day, kol makeh yevusi, makeh is makah, to hit, right? Anyone who smites the Jebusites, but it doesn't say this in English, this next part, veiga batzinor, and will touch the tzinor, ve'eta pischim ve'eta ivrim. Here it says, and removes, but it doesn't say removes, right? And will touch the tzinor. Okay, so what exactly is this tzinor? Now we're going to discuss this. The tzinor from verse 8, where Yoav was able to sneak into the city and open the gates for David to take it, was the very same place which the city of David was rediscovered by Sir Charles Warren in 1867. Tzinor, what is tzinor? Tzinor is in modern day Hebrew, is a hose, let's say. A fire hose is called a tzinor, a garden hose. A tube is called a tzinor. But so what is a tzinor? A tzinor is a conduit, primarily, especially back in the day, to transport water. Okay? So Yoav went up. He came up from where the water was being drawn within the city, because that's the last place that you would expect for the enemies to come, right? That's why there was no guards over there. He got up over there easily into the city. So anyone who is able to enter through that tzinor, to touch, if you will, that tzinor, you remove all the power. Okay, so again, we see that over there, and then we see that Sir Charles Warren in 1867, rediscovering the city of David, thousands of years later, came up exactly the same way as Yoav did back in the day. So, do we all know who Charles Warren is? Please, have a seat. Let me explain. If you don't know who this guy was, he was the number one cop, the number one investigator in London at the time, okay? One morning, Queen Victoria decided she wanted to know what was going on in Jerusalem. So, what does she do? She calls Charles Warren off his current case and says, sending you to Israel. Huh? Or Palestine then. What was the case that Sir Charles Warren was working on? I'm not even joking. Look this up. He was hot on the trails of Jack the Ripper. Yup, the famous serial killer who murdered prostitutes in the dark alleyways of London, right? And so she decides to send him to the land of Israel just to give some sort of report. One day, out of the blue, she takes this guy. People are being murdered. London is terrified. And yet, let's take him off the case and send him there. Okay. The peculiar timing of this mission does make one wonder. Perhaps he was getting too close to finding Jack the Ripper. Perhaps Jack the Ripper was a member of the royal family, which is why he was sent abroad by the Queen herself so abruptly, as she very well knew who this demented murderer was, likely a member of her own house. Now, there's nothing to corroborate this. I'm simply saying, if you look at all these things, like, why? Would just take anybody else. Why this guy who's about to catch one of the most slippery and infamous murderers, serial killers in history? Why would you do that? See what I'm saying? Yeah. Okay. And of course, it's, this wouldn't be the first time that a family member of someone in power is getting cozy with prostitutes, huh? If God brought back Jack the Ripper to have Charles Warren investigate the case and get so close, the Queen would have to send him to the then arid land of Palestine to see what's new in Jerusalem, then okay, so be it. God orchestrated all this. He brought Jack the Ripper to get this guy's profile raised. Okay, kol b'dei shamayim. Anyway, what is the meaning of the word sino? Like we said, modern Hebrew, it's a pipe, a tube, a hose, but really it serves as a conduit. This is where the water flowed. And as we know, take the water, take the city. Water is life. Take that away. You know what comes next. David indeed ended up taking the city, as proven from history. If you go today to the city of David, you will see the Torah mamash come to life. We continue. And he conquered Jerusalem. He bought it with money and an everlasting title deed. How was this done? He went to each tribe and he collected 50 shekels, which would be a total of 600 shekels. I said in 1 Chronicles 21:25, but we're going to read 24 and 26. And King David said to Ornan, "No, for I will buy it for the full price. For I will not take what is yours for the Lord and offer up burnt offerings for nothing." And David gave to Ornan for the place shekels of gold weighing 600. And David built an altar there to the Lord, and he offered up burnt offerings and peace offerings, and he called out to the Lord, and he answered him with fire from heaven on the altar of the burnt offerings. That's how you know that God's paying attention. You build the offer, you pray, God is the one that burns it, right? This is David completing the circle of Abraham, and now he will do the same for Isaac. Remember, David, he conquered the city, but he also paid for that land so that no one will be able to contest it later on. And Isaac made a covenant with the people of the land when he lived among the Philistines. Here we go, it's the Philistines right here. Now it's important to note, Isaac didn't make any new covenants per se with the people of the land, but he did a continuation to the covenant of Abraham, his father, which still needed undoing. So technically, we learned that David already did that, but we still have to take this into account. Now Isaac saw that they, the Philistines, turned their faces away from him, but he left them in peace, right? They had a covenant of peace between them, between Avimelech and Abraham, the Philistines, right? But then when they turned their back on him, technically they broke the covenant. The story that happened with Isaac is similar to that of Abraham regarding hiding their wives and saying that their wives were their sisters. Our sages say that if he would have tarried any longer among them, they would have actually done him harm. And Avimelech and all his ministers followed Isaac, meaning after they sent him away. Isaac said to them, "You turned your face from me, and now you come to me?" As said in Genesis 26:27. And Isaac said to them, "Why have you come to me, since you hate me, and you sent me away from you? Why indeed are you coming after me now, O invaders of the land of Canaan?" Philistine comes from the word plishtim, that's how it says in Hebrew. Plishtim comes from the word liflosh. Liflosh is to invade. Philistines, Palestinians. See what I'm saying? Okay, where's David to kick some butt? So the very next verse says, "And they said, 'We have seen that the Lord was with you,'" just like they said to Abraham. "We have seen that the Lord was with you." So we said, "Okay, let there now be an oath between us, between ourselves and you, and let us form a covenant with you." Vayomru ra'o ra'inu, doubly. Surely we have seen. See, we have seen. Ra'o ra'inu. We have seen twice. Once we saw with your father Abraham. Indeed, you are your father's son. You look just like him, and you possess his power, right? So what did they see? When a person is clearly acting different than the rabble, than the people of the land, when a person is moral and ethical, humble and contrite, not to be confused with any type of weakness, but rather when one walks in confidence because of their humility, true humility. In other words, they truly understand where they are. How can we possibly understand where we are? The more we learn about the magnitude of God, the smaller we become. Because you're like, yo, I get humbled when I just see, those YouTube videos about, let's say, the size of the earth compared to the size of the sun. It's like a speck, and the size of the sun compared to the size of this planet, and so on. You see, we are so tiny. Now, think of the Almighty which is everything way beyond the space that we could possibly imagine. And yet here we are. And yet here he put us and gave us a mind and a heart and the Torah and said, I want to be close to you. This is how you be close to me. That's very humbling. That's why we have to think about that. So when we get that, we walk in humility, and that's really what gives us strength, because the strength is not our own. You get it? That's where our strength lies. Okay. So, like we said, when one walks in confidence because of their true humility, God immediately not only raises that individual up, right? But everything they touch is blessed. And those who are kind to them will receive the same in return. Or as God told Abraham, I will bless those who bless you, and those who curse you will be damned. They weren't doing this out of the kindness of their hearts, obviously. They were doing this for the sake of self-preservation. Anybody with half a brain would do the same. They said, we know that the Holy One, blessed be He, is going to give you all these lands, to you and to your seed. Make a covenant with us that Israel will not inherit the land of the Philistines. Notice they are not talking about Isaac coming after them, but his descendants. Now, what did Isaac actually do? What did he do? It said he cut off 1 amah, that's about 45 centimeters, of the bridle of the ass upon which he was riding, and he gave it to them that it might be in their hands for a sign of the covenant of the oath. In Hebrew, the wording is amah achat mimeteg chamor. Amah, the amah achat, one, mimeteg, from the bridle of chamor. Chamor is a donkey. In this case, it's a she-donkey, it's an ass. Okay, so remember the language. What is the significance of this? Avimelech never laid a finger on Rivka, meaning he restrained himself. Meaning, it's not that he restrained himself, he got a warning, go ahead, see what happens if you go there. Or don't you dare go there, then you and your house will be done, right? Nevertheless, he still had free will, even though it was fear is a very strong deterrent, he restrained himself. God looks at that favorably as well. In other words, even if we do or don't do things, for instance, let's say, thou shalt not steal. I'm afraid of the authorities, that's why I don't do it. Okay, I'm afraid of God, that's why I don't do it. That's already a different story. But I'm not doing it because that's what the Torah says. Fear aside, that's even greater. But I'm not doing it because I love God so much and He told me this, so of course I'm going to not do that. That's the highest level. So they did this out of the lowest level, out of fear. Nevertheless, God counts that because He's awesome like that. Every single positive point that you could get, He's going to give it to you. Why? Because every single negative thing that you do or say or think, you're getting that too. So Isaac gave him the very tool, the bridle, which one steers or restrains a beast. You see, that's why he specifically gave him that piece. And when King David wanted to enter into the land of the Philistines, he could not because of the covenants of Isaac. As we said before, the Jebusites, as well as the Philistines, broke the covenant by encroaching on the land of Israel beyond their borders. And also, as we said, Isaac continued the covenant of Abraham, but that's only because the Philistines broke it by turning their backs on Isaac. That's why they renewed the covenant with him. Where? In 2 Samuel 8:1 it says, and it came to pass after this that David smote the Philistines, and he subdued them. And David took Meteg Amah from the hands of the Philistines. Meteg ha'amah. That is the same thing that Amah achat mi meteg chamor. Meteg ha'amah. So they took the same thing. He took the very sign that Isaac gave them, right? Taking care of business. And it is also written in 1 Samuel 7:13, and the Philistines were subdued, and they came no more into the border of Israel, and the hand of the Lord was upon the Philistines all the days of Samuel. Also taking care of business. However, when the days of Samuel were at an end, the uncircumcised Philistines reared their impure heads, primarily in the form of Goliath. So David took it, his head, impure head. And by the way, you think it's a coincidence that David took Goliath's head to Jerusalem instead of to Shiloh, which was the capital at that time? That's where Saul was sitting. Why did he take it in Jerusalem? To show them covenants have been broken. I'm coming for you next. So, thank God for David. Okay. And last but not least, Jacob made a covenant with the people of the land. Okay, so we got Abraham last class and a little bit now. We got Isaac. Here we go into Jacob. Now, can you remember who throughout Jacob's life did he make an actual covenant with? And Lavan said to him, I know, and he really did, that the Holy One, blessed be He, will give your seed all these lands. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Okay, here we go. Let us continue. The questions that our commentators have here is the location of Aram Naharaim. That's where he went, right? That's where Lavan was living. Also known as the land of Aram, hence Lavan ha-Arami, from Aram, the Aramite, right? So where is this land? Where is this place? Our initial understanding of the location of this ancient biblical place is in Turkey, north of Syria, right? To north of Israel, you got Lebanon, you have Syria, and right north of Syria is Turkey. So Aram Naharaim is actually, it's beyond the borders of Syria, already right in there in southern Turkey. Now, but these are not within the borders of Israel, meaning up until Turkey. However, it turns out that another name for this land of Aram is Damascus, and that is within the borders of biblical Israel, especially biblical Israel to be, future biblical Israel. Aram is not just one place. Aram is an area, not a country. And its borders stretched from Turkey through Syria to the borders of Israel. Okay? And you should know, we should all know, that the future borders of Israel include Damascus, like we said, and this is even written in the Tanakh. The Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, said in the Jerusalem Talmud that the Kinnite, the Kenizzite, and the Cadmonite, the ancients, are all Damascus. Okay? In other words, the Kinnite is Damascus, the Kenizzite, and the Cadmonite. These are all Damascus. 1 Chronicles 18:5-6. And Aram of Damascus came to aid Hadarezer, king of Zobah. And David smote of Aram, meaning of the area, the armies of the area, 22,000 men. And David placed garrisons in Aram of Damascus. And the Arameans became vassals to David, paying tribute. And the Lord gave victory to David wherever he went. It's written in our Yalkut Shimoni that the borders of Jerusalem will extend until Damascus. That's just the borders of Jerusalem, up until Damascus, as it is said in Zechariah 9:1. The prophecy of the word of the Lord in the land of Hadrach, Chadrach in Hebrew, but Americans can't say that. Anyway, and Damascus is his resting place, meaning as far as it goes, that's as Damascus. For man's eye shall be to the Lord and all the tribes of Israel. V'damesek menuchato. The borders are Damascus, including Damascus. And the actual future division of the land, according to the tribes, was given to Ezekiel. How do we know it's the future and not after the return to Zion for the building of the second temple? Right? We understood that they went back there. They went back to Israel from Babylon and Persia, Purim story in between. But Ezekiel actually received the future borders. So what's going on here? Because at one point, there were no more tribes, right? There was only Judah. After the Babylonian exile, we were all Jews. That officially Jews from Judea, with a mixture of all the 10 tribes who fled, like we said, the Assyrians down south, and they mixed in with the tribe of Judah. So right now, today, nobody knows what tribe they are from. That is only in the time of Mashiach. Mashiach will tell you exactly what tribe you're from, and then you're going to have to move to your respective location, do a tikkun over there. Israel becomes one, 12 stones become one. You understand the rest. Let's read where it says it in Ezekiel. Ezekiel 47, 13-21. So said the Lord God, This is the border whereby you shall divide the land for inheritance to the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph taking 2 portions. Remember, Joseph became Ephraim and Manasseh, who actually, that's 3 portions because you have 2 half tribes, right? And you shall inherit it, one as another, being that I lifted up my hand to give it to your forefathers, and this land shall be to you an inheritance, nachala. And this is the border of the land. The northern side from the great sea to the way of Hethlon to the road leading to Zedad, Hamat, Berota, Sibraim. It's easier if I read these in Hebrew. Anyway, which is between the border of Damascus and the border of Hamat, Chatzer Hatichon, which is by the border of Chavran. And the border shall be from the sea to Chasor Enon, the border of Damascus, and the northward is the border of Hamat. This is the northern side. And the eastern side is between Chavran and Damascus. We see Damascus everywhere over here. In fact, it's a staple of how the land is going to be divided. Between Gilead and the land of Israel and the Jordan, from the border by the eastern sea shall you measure. This is the eastern side. And the southern side from Tamar until the water of Meribah, of Meribath Kadesh, to the stream that falls into the great sea. This is the southern side. And the western side is the great sea, right? The Mediterranean Sea, Yam HaTichon, Hayam HaGadol also know. Upeat Yam, Hayam HaGadol, that's what it says, from the border until opposite the road leading to Hamat. This is the western side. And you shall divide this land among yourselves according to the tribes of Israel, right? Did that ever happen? No. Therefore, we know it's in the future because this was in between the destruction of both temples. Now, as far as our story with Jacob is concerned, remember we have already fled Lavan's house and began to move south when Lavan all of a sudden catches up with us, right? Or with Jacob, but I like to be there. And the covenant that was made along with the stone that was placed were all in the future borders of the land of Israel. He left outside the land of Israel, came into the borders of the land of Israel. That's where Lavan caught up with them, right? And Lavan said to him, I know that the Holy and Blessed be He will give your seed all these lands. Come and make a covenant and oath with me that Israel will not inherit the land of Aram. Genesis 31:53, we see that Jacob swore in addition to setting up a monument between them as a covenant. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor judge between us. Ve'elohei Avraham ve'elohei Nahor. Elohim is another word for God. It's another aspect of God. And yet, the English translation says, the God of Abraham, capital G, the God of Nahor, who's Abraham's father, little g. Why? False gods. Lo ta'aseh Elohim acharim, lo yeh lecha Elohim acharim al panai. You will not have other gods, other Elohim. Okay. So, and the God of Nahor judge between us, the God of their father. Again, lowercase g. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Vayshava Yaakov befachad Yitzchak aviv. What is pachad Yitzchak? We discussed this when Isaac was on the altar and he died. The angel Nuriel descended and he turned into a fire lion who basically stood above Isaac. Isaac died, went up to the heavens, and he saw everything happening behind the scenes. He got tremendous fear, which is why Isaac was a master of the negative commands. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do that, because he saw how everything has an effect, right? And then when Isaac was replaced with the ram, that fire angel in the shape of a lion, of a crouching lion, was consuming the offering, and that's the same lion that they saw in the first temple. So Jacob made a stone monument and included his sons in the oath covenant made by Lavan, as said in Genesis 31:46. And Jacob said to his brethren, Vayomer Yaakov le'echav, literally his brothers, gather stones, and they took stones and made a pile, and they ate there by the pile. Now, so they, al-hagal, the pile of stones, right? Were they his brothers? No, they were his sons. This comes to teach us that a man's sons are like his brothers. Remember that teaching we had, I think it was like a few weeks ago, all about this, for this very reason. It explains what's going on over here. Jacob's only single brother was Esav, and he wasn't there. And he took his Echav, his sons. Okay. This is the sense that they're all like his kinsmen. Furthermore, there has to be a distinction made over here. The sons gathered stones for the gal, the wave, the wall, the pillar of stones. But Jacob took one stone. So there's two, right? This we can read in Genesis 31:51. And Lavan said to Jacob, behold this pile and behold this monument, which I have cast between me and you. In other words, I'm not only making a deal with you, Jacob, but also with the children of Jacob, because it's about what comes next. Lavan then said to him, if Israel inherit the land, they should not come through the land of Aram with bad intent, as said in the next verse in 52. This pile is a witness, not from you, from your children, right? And this monument is a witness, because you have to solidify this as their father, that I will not pass this pile to go to you, and you shall not pass this pile and this monument to come to me to do harm. In other words, if you want only with peaceful intent before God, right? You swear by your God, I'll swear by the false God. Okay. But when David was king, he wanted to go to the land of Aram, but he could not because of the oath of Jacob. What did he do? Until he broke or shattered the monument. Who told David that he could break the oath of Jacob with Lavan? What's going on over here, right? I believe that since Lavan's grandson, Bilam, remember him, who advised Pharaoh on drowning the Israelite boys in the Nile. This is the same Bilam who tried to have Moses killed when he was a child in the house of Pharaoh. This is the same Bilam who tried to kill Moses for 60 years from the time that he fled Egypt until 20 years, from the time he was 20 until he was 80, till he returned. The same Bilam who sent his own children, Yanis and Yambres, to instigate the golden calf to which we are suffering from the repercussions until this very day. The very same Bilam who, despite God telling him not to go and curse Israel, gave it his best effort to do so regardless of his failure. Who broke the covenant? Was it Jacob's children or Lavan's children? See what I'm saying? The bottom line is, though, the covenant had been broken long ago, which is why God explicitly told Moses to smash them all. As said in Exodus 23:24, what God didn't know about these covenants, then why would he say this? God does not negate an oath that is made by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God agrees with them, unless the other side breaks a covenant, which they did, and here we go. You shall not prostrate yourself before their gods, and you shall not worship them, and you shall not follow their practices, but you shall tear them down, and you shall utterly shatter their monuments. Exactly. Boom. Done. God said so, and there it was. And after David did all this, he conquered the land of Aram, as said, and David smote Hadar-ezer ben Rechov, king of Tzobah. Now let's read exactly what happened as a result, as we will see, that if you do what we all need to do, God will send us the problems that need fixing so as not to trouble us that we should go too far to fix them. Okay? Same case in point, Gog and Magog, right? He will put the hooks in their jaws. I will bring you to the land of Israel. Israel doesn't have to go fight them. I'm going to gather everybody here together, one fell swoop. Boom, there you go. I'll take care of everything. Israel, you chill. 2 Samuel 8:1-15. And it came to pass after this that David smote the Philistines and subdued them, and David took Meteg Ammah from the hand of the Philistines. Right? We read this. And he smote Moab, and he measured them off with a line, making them lie down on the ground. And he measured 2 cord lengths to put to death, and 1 full cord length to keep alive. And the Moabites became as servants to David, bringing presents. And David smote Hadar-ezer, the son of Rechov, king of Zobah, as he went to extend his dominion to the Euphrates River. And David is expanding his kingdom. And David captured from him 1,700 horsemen and 20,000 foot captured alive, and 20,000 footmen. And David hewed all the chariot horses and left over הרכב יעקב ויעקר David et kol harechev. He plucked, uprooted. I guess that's the word. I'm not familiar with the word. He uprooted all the chariots and all the horses and left over them for 100 chariots. So he left them just with 100 chariots. And Aram of Damascus came to aid Hadarezer, king of Zobah. We needed to break this. God made Aram come right to David's feet to get smitten. And Aram of Damascus came to aid Hadarezer, king of Zobah, and David smote Aram, 22,000 men. And David placed governors in Aram of Damascus, and the Arameans became servants to David, paying tribute to him. And the Lord helped David wherever he went. And David took the quivers of gold that were on the servants of Hadarezer and brought them to Jerusalem. And from Betach and from Berotai, the cities of Hadarezer, King David took huge quantities of copper. And Toi, the king of Hamat, heard that David had defeated all the army of Hadarezer. And Toi sent Joram, his son, to King David to greet him and to bless him, because he had fought against Hadarezer and defeated him. For Hadarezer had been Toi's opponent in war. You just defeated my enemy? Buddy, come here. We should talk. And in his possession were vessels of silver and vessels of gold and vessels of copper. These also the king David, the Gam Otam Ikdish HaMelech David. These also King David dedicated. I found the mess up here in English. Okay, these also King David dedicated to the Lord, along with the silver and the gold that he dedicated from all the nations that he had conquered. From all the spoils that David is taking, he brings it up to Jerusalem. He's preparing the grounds for Solomon to build a temple when the time comes. At this point, though, he didn't know that he was not allowed to build a temple, right? It was formulating, it was stewing within him. From Aram and from Moab and from the children of Ammon and from the Philistines and from Amalek and from the spoils of Hadarezer, the son of Rechov, king of Zobah. And David made for himself a name when he returned from smiting the Arameans in the Valley of Salt, 18,000 men. And he placed governors in Edom. Throughout all of Edom he placed governors. And all of Edom became servants to David. And the Lord saved David wherever he went. And David reigned over Israel, and David administered justice and charity for all his people. Vayimloch David al kol Israel, not just Judah, all of Israel. Vayhi David oseh mishpat vetzedakah. My friends, when we live for God, meaning everything we do is for God's name's sake, he will bring our enemies to us and make them drop beneath our feet. Justice and charity, this is both judgment and righteousness. Gvura and chesed. I'm going to say the following in Hebrew, okay? First, I'm going to say this in English. I would like you to repeat after me. I'm going to say this 3 times. This is very important. This is the cry for the Mashiach, especially now in the 9 days, especially coming into Tisha B'Av. You know, it says that Mashiach is supposed to be born on Tisha B'Av. Now, up until actually today, we all thought, me personally, that a child has to actually be born on that day. That is not so. That's the concept of Ibul. What is Ibul? Like we learned, Ibul is the conception. So in other words, the spirit of Mashiach, the neshama of Mashiach, is going to descend into an individual on Tisha B'Av. That's where he will be born, as we can read in Isaiah 11, right? And he will be endowed with everything that he needs to. And then for 40 days from that time, 40 days moving forward, it says that he's going to disappear, meaning he's going to go into, as Moses went up and he received the download of all the Torah, not only the Torah then, but all the Torah until the end of time, because the Torah that he received over there, that's what everything has been extrapolated from all the way until the end of time. So Moses received everything in 40 days. So Mashiach is supposed to receive the same thing, going in between a pillar of fire at night and a pillar of smoke during the day. But he's still not going to be self-aware of who he is. Only after those 40 days are done, which I believe it comes out to Kafhei in Elul is the day that the world was created. Yom Briat HaOlam. It's also my dad's birthday. Anyway, so on that day, that's where he becomes self-aware once he returns to the public. And it's like, he realizes what's going on. No one is going to believe it's him. No one, because he'll be like, that guy, I know that guy. That there's no way that he's the Mashiach. But then he's going to start being tested, and he's going to answer all the questions. He's going to know every single thing about the Torah back and forth. In any case, and it says he comes from, a regular set of parents, was an average dude. And we've learned this before. Mashiach is not a great tzaddik before. Mashiach is not a great rabbi. Mashiach is a regular dude. What gives him his greatness, he's endowed by the power of God. Okay, so now we are calling Mashiach. We're saying, arise, son of David, King Mashiach. Please repeat after me. Kum ben David, Malka Meshicha. Kum ben David, Malka Meshicha. Kum ben David, Malka Meshicha. And that's it. That's what we're doing, okay? And we got to say this every day when we get frustrated, and even more so when we don't get frustrated. Kum ben David Malka Meshicha. Cry out, okay? This is how we do it. If enough of us cry out and another person keeps crying out, hopefully that cry will be the same cry that got God to bring Moses into the picture, right? We're looking for the same thing right now. Because as we said, Acharit Kereshit. The final redemption will be a mirror of the first. And that's today's class. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a pensive week. Have a meaningful fast. And have a Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.